Hello and welcome to a special holiday edition of the Wise Guys podcast. We're recording this right around Thanksgiving, so whenever you're hearing this, we hope you had a happy Thanksgiving and are looking
Mm.
forward to a wonderful Christmas with your families. Lenny, how are you doing?
Good. Let's just do a quick introduction. My name is Lenny.
And I'm Matt, and we are the Wise Guys. And typically on these episodes, we go through the Proverbs and try to discuss topics that will help us to become more wise, one proverb at a time or one topic at a time. But today we've got a little bit of a special topic. And as Lenny and I were just talking about it before hitting record, it's not necessarily one that's found in Proverbs. But Lenny, how did we come up with this topic?
Yeah, so we've been asking around, sharing our podcasts, and it was actually over dinner. I was talking to a friend about topics that we could talk about, and he was relating that he was reading this essay or this book by Jeremiah Burroughs on Earthly-Mindedness. And he just said, "Hey, have you read it before? Love to hear what you thinking about it. What, if you could, just talk a little bit about it on an episode." And here we are doing an episode on Earthly Mindedness. So thank you very much, friend.
Yeah, that's awesome. Shout out to the person that introduced this topic. And that just shows you that, hey, we're at a stage of our podcast where we really appreciate all three of the people who listen to this. And so if any of you have any kind of topic you want us to talk about, I mean, now's your chance. We're pretty desperate. So it doesn't even have to do with Proverbs. Just ask us anything.
Yeah, we're willing to sacrifice a lot. But actually, this does kind of have to do with Proverbs and in terms of living our lives here on earth in a wise manner. Uh,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like a little meta because
Hmm.
it's like living here on earth and how to live here on earth, but not live of this world, but be in this world kind of thing,
Yeah, what is that saying? No, I'm not. I'm in the
Not
world, but
of this
not of the
world.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, interesting. Well, I had a chance to actually, I listened to that book. There's actually a recording on YouTube of
Oh,
somebody reading the book, and I think it's like a public, like free book. So
oh,
you can go online. I think you can just read the whole thing online, or you can listen to it on YouTube. It's one of those things where it's public domain. It's so old that it's free. Um, and I had not read this one before. I'd actually read a book called The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment by Jeremiah Burroughs, which I really like. And so I was excited to listen to this one, and it didn't disappoint. It is, like you mentioned, a Puritan. I think it might have been adapted from his sermons or something like that in his
mm,
compilation. But in typical fashion, it's like, here are 17 ways to identify if you're being earthly minded. Here's 25, evils that will result from being earthly minded, etc.
yeah, yeah.
Just like crazy amounts of numbers of lists, and then it's like this really lengthy thing. But there's some great illustrations and points made, even though it's I think a few hundred or yeah many years ago that
Mm.
he wrote that. I'm actually not sure when Jeremiah Burroughs lived, but it was not in the 21st century.
And actually, if you've been following any of the Christian Puritan stuff, it was Puritan Month last month.
No
And
way.
there was a big conference about it and had a lot of speakers about Puritans and stuff. So running off the tail end of that, I think it was really appropriate to just kind of approach this topic. But just in general, I guess like we just wanted to chat about this topic and what it really means to be earthly minded, and maybe even address the question of is it possible to be so heavenly minded that you are of no earthly good um,
Yeah, I've heard
as a
that one
Christian?
before.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the heart behind that is just, I think I know kind of what it's saying, which is that somebody that doesn't pay attention to, things that practically they ought to be paying attention to in real life, like, their work or their responsibilities. Someone who's always thinking about got their head in the clouds, right?
Mm.
So I think that's where that comes from. But in this collection of essays or this message, uh, the intention is really to set these two ways of living, one being earthly minded and the other being heavenly minded, against each other, and saying that I think his text is in Philippians 3, where it describes this group of people that set their minds on earthly things. And ultimately, in that context, these are people that are not Christian, they're not godly. And Paul is telling the disciples in the church of Philippi to not be like these people, but instead to follow his example of being heavenly minded, and that their citizenship, he reminds them, is in heaven, and therefore their hearts and their treasure should be in heaven rather than on earth. And so those are the two things that are set up in contrast to each other. And I think it's very timely for us today. For me, especially, I felt really convicted by this book, in the sense that it's very easy for us in modern day American Christianity to not even be aware that there might be a lot of earthly mindedness in our thoughts and the way that we live our lives, and that we care so much about, we spend so much time and energy and our attention on things of this earth, which is not in and of itself bad, but these things consume so much of what we live for, in terms of things like our job, our career, relationships, money, seeking success. Kind of, again, there's nothing wrong with success in an earthly standard or in earthly sense, but these things, at least for me, I think it's easy for them to take that center place in my heart, rather than, I think there's a good illustration in the book where it talks about how, when the difference between, like, when a father is, let's say, playing ball with his young son, like, for the child, like, all they care about in that moment, all they're focused on is that game, right? And catching the ball or whatever, and that occupies their entire attention, because of course they're young, and that's really, they're all they can think about is what's in front of them, right? They haven't matured. But for the father, he's playing the game and he's able to have fun and enjoy it, but there are greater things kind of in the back of his mind that he's, that he needs to attend to, like greater responsibilities in his life, that he knows that this isn't all there is in life. Like, this ball game isn't all there is in life, right? So I thought that was kind of an apt illustration, that while we're on this earth, going about our earthly activities, going to work, making money, etc., like, yes, these things are things that we can focus on, but in the back of our minds, there's something that's far greater, that is far more important, that has our heart and has our, attention.
Yeah, and this is an interesting dilemma, because you might be a Christian, very much like me, who's trying to live wisely, and being wise as serpents, innocent as doves, trying to navigate this life, while trying to maximize our earning potential here on earth, trying to accrue as much investments as possible, or trying to figure out how to, like, marry the right person, or even raise your children in a God-fearing way, or the best and most efficient way. And while you're pursuing all these things, you're thinking, well, I really do want to do this for God, but, like, how much do I get into this, or how do I, the temptation is to be lost in the whole journey of doing these things and being successful here on earth. But the Bible's super clear, right? Like, these things were all all blessings from God to prosper us and all these things. But really, we can't miss the mark. God is the one who is giving us all these things. God is the one who is worthy of our praise, not these gifts, but the giver. And I think this dilemma is, like, it can't ever be how much can I how like how much can I be wise on this earth? Rather, how I guess how successful can I be on this earth?
Hmm.
But more like how successful can I be in God's like kingdom?
Yeah, I
I-
think, yeah, I think what you're trying to say is that this principle that Jesus taught in his Sermon on the Mount, that you can't serve two masters, right? You
yeah,
can't serve God and wealth. And it's interesting. There's so many warnings in the New Testament, particularly. I think we've talked about this in previous episodes about wealth and how the love of money, right? Wanting to pursue money is a snare, and it can trap you. It can make you so, like you said, focused on it that you neglect the things that are more important. Seeking first God's kingdom, seeking first His righteousness, storing up treasures in heaven. Those things that have a more lasting value. Um, but we can be distracted. We can be snared by only seeking first our own kingdom, wealth, fame, success in this world, even though these things are a blessing. And taking it back to Proverbs, it also talks about how wealth, uh, you know, if you seek after it, it's not necessarily something that will last. It will sprout its wings and it can fly away, as many of us have experienced this year through our various investments. It's not
yes,
something you can really put your trust in, rather trusting in the Lord who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. And then in Proverbs, it also talks about the principle of contentment. And there's a prayer that asks God to not give me too much or too little. And it seems like this path of moderation and contentment, which we've talked about before, is what someone that truly is wise and fears the Lord wants, because they recognize with a lot of wealth, with a lot of earthly fortune, there comes temptations that come along with that, and problems that come along with that, and they'd rather have enough that they need to be able to live out their time on earth and have that dependence on God and seek the more important things. So, yeah, I think it's been a really good reminder to me, right? Because I know you and I, were very blessed to have education and parents that kind of value that, and grew up in a society and among people that really value education, succeeding in school and work and having a good job, making a lot of money.
mm-hmm.
And there's a sense in which it's our duty to contribute to society and make money and become live up to our potential, use our talents. But it's a very subtle thing, especially in these bubbles where the people around us, right, people that are not God fearing, this is their ultimate goal in life, right, to seek money and success and wealth and fame. There's no other thing for them, and so we might become influenced by them.
Yeah. And I mean, if there's anything that you take away, I let this be a warning, maybe even a challenge to recognize this example of like you can have two really successful people, but one person can be storing up treasures on earth, and another person can be storing up all their treasure in heaven. And so, which person are you? And I know a lot of times I'm duped into thinking, oh, I'm going to store up treasure in heaven, but really I'm just being selfish and storing up treasure on earth.
Hmm.
But it's really this heart change, right? Like these people can look exactly the same, but they're completely different in outcomes when God returns.
Yeah. I mean, so we started off kind of talking about how typically, we focus on a theme in Proverbs, but this one kind of originated outside of Proverbs, and that it was this sermon or this book that's written focusing on this one verse in Philippians that, um, you know, kind of has this thematic. The theme is earthly mindedness versus heavenly mindedness. But I was just thinking that, I think there's a parallel in Proverbs, and of course, kind of going back to that thesis statement of Proverbs that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So it's the way of fearing the Lord versus the way of the fool. And as we know through reading throughout Proverbs, there's this contrast between the wise person who we're trying to be and the fool who we have tendencies of being, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a parallel in that the fool is the one that sets their mind on earthly things, right? Because they don't fear the Lord. They don't acknowledge God in all of their ways. And so what's left besides the Lord? It's just the physical things on earth. And this is all that they can see, all that they can pursue and live for is things on earth. And again, like you said, a lot of these things might be good. I mean, you might live your life and be a good, upstanding person, helping others, living a moral life. But if your heart is on this earth and it's not in heaven, and it's not wanting to and desiring to grow and please the Lord, then you're not only is it neutral, it's actively not
Against.
honoring God, right?
Yeah.
You're against God. Your friendship with the world is enmity towards God, right? So we can't be friends with the world. We can't be in the sense of making the world and its riches and its goals and aims our ultimate goals and our aims. It's like that father that's playing ball with his son. Like, this is a fun activity and I'm going to play it well, but ultimately in the back of my mind, there's something far greater than this.
Yeah, definitely. And so maybe you're listening to this and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't even know what these two people are talking about. And maybe you are not a Christian. And maybe, I'm thankful that you've listened to this podcast and you're come to this point in the episode. But, I want to challenge you as well. Is there something more that is deeper, more meaningful that you can pursue in your life? Not just, reproduction, and being successful and then enjoying life and then dying and then reproducing and then this constant purposeless cycle. Is there something deeper? And I would suggest to you that there's something more meaningful to life than just the things that we can see here, but that we have a God who cares for us deeply and gives us purpose because he created us. And so if you want to talk more about that, you can always message us.
Yeah. And for the rest of us, I think for me especially, this was a really good reminder, just kind of reading or listening to that book. You can download it online, just search for I think A Treatise of Earthly-Mindedness by Jeremiah Burroughs. Strongly recommend that as a resource and just as a reminder, just to be reinvigorated in terms of refocusing on seeking first God and his kingdom and his righteousness and living a life that fears the Lord. And, one thing that I was reminded of is that, a lot of times we talk about how, the aim of our podcast and what we want to discuss is wisdom, right? How to live skillfully, right? How to have skill in living your life. And a lot of these things seem like they're neutral. There's no sort of spirituality to it. It's very practical. And that's why we love the Proverbs. I love the Proverbs because it's so practical and wisdom is so practical. But really, there is a spiritual and there is a moral element to wisdom, and that wisdom that is from above and is heavenly and is focused on God, and that it is one that leads to life, and it leads to a life that honors God, and in turn we receive the greatest joy and blessing from that. Whereas earthly wisdom is not only neutral, but it's in the Bible it talks about how it's natural, earthly, and demonic, and leads to the path that leads to death. So none of this wisdom really matters in a sense unless you are applying it within the context of fearing the Lord and having the right heart, which is why it's so important to remember that we're not just talking about practical ways to make your life better, live more skillfully, but really these are spiritual and life and death kind of matters.
Yeah, I hope this discussion has got you thinking. I hope this discussion has stirred your heart to fix your eyes on what is above and not what's here on earth. And I hope this stirs your heart to listen to our next episode on the
Which,
Wise Guys podcast.
if you want to ask us a question or you want us to talk about any topic that's related to wisdom or Christian living or the Proverbs, you know how to reach out to us through our various social media handles. Um, Ask us anything, and maybe you'll be featured in a future episode.
Thanks for listening, guys.